Okay, hi there everybody. Here we go. This is round 2 of our flipped classroom video. So tomorrow in class, or the next time I see you, we're going to be analyzing a primary source. And one of the reasons that we're doing that comes from the very debate that we were having today. Right? How do we find the truth? How do we know whether there is that 20% tax cut? How do we know who's going to draw the troops back and who's going to keep the troops there? That's that question that we said until the moderator rips out that piece of paper and says, okay, Paul Ryan, you do the math, or Joe Biden, you do the math. We're not sure, so we have to go to our set of skills to identify whether or not something is a credible source. The first one is to use a fact-checking site. As I shared with you guys, when I'm watching those debates, sometimes I can be just as confused as you are, and I have more homework and sometimes more questions after the debate than I do before I went into it. So there are a couple of great fact-checking sites out there. There's Snopes, there's Crooks and Liars, and there's actually a plethora of other ones out there, and you can even Google fact-checking sites and get a nice list. And I just keep that right in my computer, bookmark it, pull it down, put in my facts, and then I can find out whether PolitiFact says that there is going to be that 20% tax cut or there's not. Because remember, they're all going to try and spin it one way or the other. Next, you want to always make sure that you're trying to watch as many different media outlets as possible. Some are going to be more conservative and some are going to be more liberal. So I always had the idea that if you watched not necessarily all of them, but a good variety, that there's a possibility that that could happen, that you would get that valuable information. The next one, number 3, check for proper citations. You can claim anything you want to out there, but unless you're citing it and unless you're saying where that information came from, then that's not necessarily going to be a valid source. You have to always make sure, where's that information coming from? It's the difference between a secondary source and a primary source. And that's what you want to do when you're looking for those citations. Is the person who's commenting on it using a primary source, or are they using secondary? So let's do a quick little review of the difference between primary and secondary sources. I know you're all hoping that it was going to fall on my head, but I'm being very careful. Okay, so when we have a primary source is that first-hand information, an eyewitness account of what occurred. That could be voting records. I put this one first because it really has to do the most with what we're learning right now. How do we know what where Mitt Romney stands on an issue? Well, how did he vote on it? Did he create an executive order? What about President Obama? He has a voting record as a senator and he has a record as a president. Both for Joe Biden and Paul Ryan as well. All have been senators or congressmen. They all have some sort of voting record that we could look to. All right, speeches. Speeches are a primary source. They're excellent. That's what we're going to analyze the next time I see you, one of George Washington's speeches. What can this be a little dangerous, though? This can be dangerous because if someone's spinning in their speech, then you might not get the true facts. You might have the truth, but it could be twisted a little bit. And then obviously, if this is a history class, we could look back to letters, journals. That's one of the reasons why we have the information that we do today from the past, because of letters and correspondence between people. You may have even heard Joe Biden last night referring to letters that were sent between him and Senator Paul. Next, court transcripts. In class we talked about affirmative action. Well, Supreme Court as we speak is deliberating and discussing the whole topic of affirmative action. So when we're deciding, is affirmative action going to be constitutional, we would look to those court transcripts and what did the justices say. Obviously, historical documents and doing a poll or doing a case study. Right? How do we find out information? Do more people support an issue, or are more people rejecting it? Well, they're going to do a poll to do that. Secondary sources, that's that second-hand information, or when someone is commenting on that first-hand experience that you have in a primary source. Secondary information are textbooks. Notice we don't use a textbook for this class because it is not as valid a source as a primary source. this is where we're going to get our information from. Encyclopedia, it's not just Wikipedia that I say I don't want you to use, it's all encyclopedias. Does that mean that all encyclopedias are false? No, but the best information and the best way to win your debate is to be credible, and what makes credible people? Primary sources. Magazines, newspapers, book reviews, all these are those second-hand accounts of what happened. So you're putting someone's twist on it. And bias doesn't have to be intentional. It can be unintentional, which means that I'm not trying to purposely sway you. However, it's human nature for a little bit of our bias to sort of sneak in. Some of you may pick up on that in class. As I try my best to walk that center line, sometimes a little bit of that bias will show. The last one I have up here is a blog. Now, blogs are very tricky because a blog is rarely going to be a credible source. However, it is more of that first-hand account or first-hand information. So you're going to really have to assess the blog. Is this a blog of an Iranian refugee, and you're studying should we intervene in Iran, then that might be a great place to look because that person has first-hand experience. But if this is someone who's sitting in their basement and has not had any first-hand interaction with whatever you're studying, then the blog is not going to be a good source. So this is when you are going to debate, or when you're going to write a paper, or when you're going to have any argument with anyone ever, you want to use these primary sources because it's going to make your debate a more solid and better debate. The next thing you want to do, besides having primary sources, is you want to make sure you have a citation. All right? How to decipher a credible source? Look for the citation. What did they say? Did they just make a blanket statement, or did they say as found in the Supreme Court transcripts, or as found in the Gettysburg Address if it's a historical? And also, citations are how to be a credible source. If you are in an argument with someone and you can say, well, as stated in the Gallup poll, 86% of Americans disapprove of whatever it is you're arguing, you're going to be much more credible than if you just say, well, I didn't like it and I don't think people like it. You have to have those facts to back up what you believe, and you can only have that with a proper citation. Plus, here's a little piece of information that you may not know. Plagiarism and citations are connected. And now that you're in 8th grade, you're going to realize that pretty much every single paper you've ever written has been totally and completely plagiarized. Because look at the definition that we're going to have for plagiarism. Taking or using someone else's ideas. What word does it not say? It doesn't say the word words. So taking someone else's ideas without giving them credit. So, if someone makes a statement and you want to use that, you have to give them credit. Not only do you have to give them credit, but you would want, whether you change the words around or not. Plagiarism is not copying something word for word. It seems like every single paper would always be plagiarized, but it's not. The whole point is giving them credit. And I'm going to show you an example of this. You must always give the author credit for the idea. So, as stated by Thomas Friedman of the New York Times, Mrs. Lacey is the greatest teacher of all time. Boom, this is a fact. We have a New York Times writer who is saying it. This cannot be disputed. Some of you are saying, wait a second, Mrs. Lacey, I remember when you said newspapers were a secondary source, and that's good. So I have the author. I assess whether or not it's a primary or a secondary source. If this said, George Washington states, Mrs. Lacey is the greatest teacher of all times, then it would be definitely valid, and you would also want to put the page number there. Right? If you fail to give credit to the author, then you will fail, basically. But instead of, if you fail to give credit, you will not get credit for your claim. If you're going to make all these claims and statements, you're not going to get credit. You're not going to sound credible unless you have an author or unless you have a primary source document to back that up. Specifically the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence. As you saw in the first presidential debate, what did Romney quote? He quoted the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence. You're going to be hard-pressed to find someone out there who does not agree with those. All right, so here's what you want to do. Take your notes Cornell style, do a little summary of what this was about, more skills than content today, right? Telling you how to do something. And then at the bottom, you're going to do your questions, qualms, and concerns. Hopefully this video was short and sweet, and I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. See you Monday and or Tuesday.